resentment that's been boiling up inside of him. A twisted catharsis to get back at the society that treated him like dirt. And this action is the final stage of revolution, where the growing loneliness and resentment of society hits a breaking point. When new political beliefs start, this makes Gotham a ticking time bomb, and the ending of this key establishment figurehead on live TV is more than enough to set it off. To all the millions of clowns, Murray is a personification of the society that has kept them down, and it seems to be that the trigger like this is seemingly the only step we've avoided so far in today's world. But we can only hope that these changes to our society are reversed before it's too late, as over the last section of the movie, we see the consequences of this revolution play out. Chaos ensues, with riots erupting all over Gotham, and in the back of a police cruiser, Arthur sees the sheer scale of the upheaval that he has caused, and it brings a smile to his face. It seems like Arthur is on his way to be locked up for life until a rogue ambulance crashes into the vehicle, killing the two policemen, with the protesters then carrying an unconscious Arthur out of the wreckage and laying him gently on the hood of the car. After a few seconds, Arthur gazes round at the massive crowd that has formed. It's at this moment that Arthur no longer exists. His new identity, his new belief, his new hope for a better world has begun, and so he starts dancing in a similar fashion to before, as he draws a smile with blood across his mouth, and the crowd cheers seeing their messiah. At the end of the film, the Joker finds himself imprisoned in Arkham Asylum being questioned. He has been telling a psychologist a story, and begins laughing once it's all said and done. The interrogator wants to know what's so funny, but Arthur responds that she just wouldn't get it. Moments later, he steps out of the room, and the film ends on a hallway shot of Arthur walking towards a window filled with light, leaving behind a trail of bloody footprints in his wake. Just like in Joker, tragedy is all that awaits if we see this twisted course of events in our own world. Something must be done to stop these similar processes in their tracks, otherwise Joker could turn from a mere warning to a prophetic image of the future. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more controversial videos,
So busy, you can, the way this works, okay, in my opinion, is that you can use OnlyFans to present your arguments, right? In my opinion, if the point of you bring up OnlyFans is that people are a certain way, right? And then that happens. People act certain way socially, and then they do that, right? But I think doing it backwards, like, oh, OnlyFans does that to people and exploits them. I don't agree with working your way downwards. I would agree upwards. Does that make sense or not? Do you get it? Make sense? People not having real life connections and then interacting with real girls and seeing real naked women and seeing all that stuff, right? If then they have that, so then they turn to OnlyFans to buy a girl's pictures and make them feel like it's like personal for them or whatever the fuck, right? That's okay to say, I think, but doing it backwards and saying, oh, dude, OnlyFans is causing people, dude, to do this. No, I don't agree with that. I think this is a bullshit ass, stupid mentality that people have that just disintegrate all possible avenues of you of you coming to terms with responsibility. I think it's a problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's showtime!
Siren, Cascade, Rosa, Siren, really? Another round. Don't play. it all to the ground. Boring. Gorgeous Iris. Not bad. Like watch and learn. How dare you! Fields are bountiful.
Action!
Don't play. Delix higher as this. Hardly. What fun! Bullseye. Not bad. Higher at this. Higher at this. Electrify. I'm tired of this. I can't wait. No mercy! Clutches of eternity! Spiral! Grind you in the dirt! Soda! Sirocco!
Time to put on a show. Showtime!
Hold up, Cyrus! Don't blink! Shoot the moon! Face! Almost in move! Don't blink! Trim! Higher at this! No back! Cyrus? It's my turn to kill it. Blood boys, prepare the limo.
Player 2 wins. Showtime!
Nice to meet you. Almost time to start the party. Go back!
the bloodlust gain entirely. Inevitably, 3 to 4 survivors would still be alive when the gates are powered and you've just managed to get another hook. It ain't much, but it's honest work. Now it's Borrowed Time's time to shine. All 4 of these survivors would be running Borrowed Time and would have no issues whatsoever with running up to the hook and bum rushing right in front of you. This means 4 coordinated players body blocking each other, 2 of which with additional health states, all making a beeline for the exit gates, both of which were already wide open as endgame collapse wasn't a thing yet and neither was Blood Warden, so no need to 99 the doors. Even if by some miracle you downed any of them, you're going to be hit with either Decisive Strike, an insta-blind, or even if you hook them, another proc of Borrowed Time. Of course you can't slug them because you know damn well they had Unbreakable. It was a nightmare. Every single match with these players would have been Decisive Strike, Borrowed Time, Unbreakable on all 4 of them, and then maybe Self-Care or Object or something else for the last slot. No matter what you do, they have a counter that nullifies it. To sum it up, Borrowed Time always ended up serving as one last kick in the balls after an already horrible experience. While Borrowed Time was certainly not quite as bad as Decisive Strike, it still offered an absurd level of safety that survivors really had no business having. A whopping 7 months after its release, on the 14th of September 2017, Borrowed Time would receive its first nerf. Nerf. The activation window was reduced from 20 seconds down to 15. Nerf. The bleed out timer was reduced from 40 seconds down to 25. These nerfs were actually fairly sizable, and with the bleed out timer being reduced by such a drastic amount, it was now somewhat viable to just chase the survivor until the timer runs out. Sure, it was still a pretty sizable hit to the killer's pressure, but it was nowhere near as monumental of a hit as before. That being said, these nerfs took the perk even further in the wrong direction. Since this perk already made it so the killer's best option was just to tunnel the unhooked survivor instead of the unhooker, the reduced bleed out timer further incentivized disregarding the unhooker since the unhooked victim would automatically drop dead soon anyway. While Borrowed Time was far from dead, it did make it less useful in normal gameplay, but unfortunately it had almost zero effect on bully squads, as once again the doors would already be open and that's when they'd release their onslaught of BTs, and you can certainly get to a door in 25 seconds. There was a whole 7 months of people abusing it before the nerf, meaning behaviour had plenty of time to assess the situation and come up with appropriate ideas, yet it still remained a problem perk even after its nerf. If anything, it made it more of a problem perk since it was less useful in standard gameplay, meaning one of the main uses of this perk was now just bullying killers. Things needed to change. Borrowed Time's next set of changes came with the release of patch 1.9.2 on the 19th of February 2018, another 5 entire months after its previous nerf. Nerf. Borrowed Time would now only apply to the unhooked survivor. Buff. Borrowed Time now had unlimited uses. Finally, Borrowed Time now actually functioned as an anti-tunnel perk and can no longer be abused by bully squads to guarantee escapes late game. And it only took 1 year, but now a new problem arose. The perk still retained its previous values of a 15-second activation window with a 25-second bleed out timer. So killers who wanted to tunnel didn't have to wait too long for that bleed out timer to expire, with the survivor immediately dropping to the floor. Once again, the timer did not pause at all, so all the killer had to do was follow you for 25 seconds and then claim another free hook. That being said, the perk now certainly disincentivized tunneling to some extent, as the unhooker no longer had a third health state to burn through, so now going for the unhooker was actually feasible. While it would be another entire year for Decisive Strike to finally be balanced, the loss of the 2-man Borrowed Time let killers breathe a huge sigh of relief. It goes without saying though, Borrowed Time didn't need to be quite as weak as it had become. It had become an anti-tunnel perk that didn't really prevent tunneling for very long. Some slight buffs were definitely needed. Luckily, after the release of the Legion on the 18th of December 2018, Borrowed Time would receive a vital buff, the addition of Deep Wounds. Instead of Borrowed Time having its own arbitrary timer system, it would now be unified using the Legion's new mechanic. This was a vital change because Deep Wounds timer would pause indefinitely whenever the survivor was in a chase with the killer. This change was 10 entire months after its previous changes, and although Borrowed Time was far from dead and was still decent, it definitely should have received something sooner than this. That being said, Borrowed Time was certainly not perfected yet, or more accurately, Deep Wounds weren't perfected yet. Keen viewers may have noticed that I said the timer pauses when in a chase with the killer, not while sprinting. While this might not sound like that big of a difference, it certainly could be in certain scenarios. The chase mechanic as a whole was never perfect and still isn't to this very day, so it would sometimes just not register the survivor as being in a chase with the killer, even when they blatantly were, leading to the perk to sometimes function exactly like it used to, with the timer just going down anyway. Additionally, some crafty killer players would chase deep wounded survivors while looking backwards to intentionally stop the game from registering them as in chase. These caveats caused borrowed time's effectiveness to vary wildly each time it was used, whether it be due to bugs or cheeky killers. And in typical behavior fashion, this issue with borrowed time and by nature the Legion's entire ability would receive changes after another year. So on the 3rd of December 2019, deep wounds would finally be adjusted to abandon the buggy chase mechanic entirely and instead just pause when a survivor is sprinting. This is likely the version of borrowed time most of you are familiar with. Killers could no longer just follow the survivor until they automatically dropped dead, as the timer would pause whenever the survivor was sprinting. So if killers were really that desperate to tunnel, they'd have to work for it. At this point, borrowed time was in a great spot, but it still wasn't quite perfected yet. Over the years, behavior would reduce the deep wounds timer by 5 seconds and gradually reduce the activation window from 20 seconds down to 12, but none of those really had much of an impact. However, with many more stealth killers being added to the game over the years, a new issue cropped up. Borrowed time simply didn't work against most stealth killers. Remember, this entire time the perk would only activate if the unhook happened within the killer's terror radius. So killers like the Wraith and the Pig could stop the perk from activating entirely by removing their terror radiuses. Once the community as a whole caught wind of this, of course there was an influx of Wraiths turbo camping and turbo tunneling. It wasn't a huge influx because, let's be honest, nobody's itching to play as Wraith or Pig, but there was certainly a wave of it. So on the 4th of May 2021, borrowed time was buffed to activate on every unhook no matter what, regardless of terror radius. At this point, borrowed time was, in my opinion, perfected. Even if you wouldn't quite call it perfect, it was in a good enough spot for the community to welcome it with open arms when it would eventually be made base kit on all survivors, with the perk itself simply adding 10 seconds to the activation window, which is where we're at today. I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you so much for sticking to the end. I've noticed that now that I've seen some success with this style of video, a bunch of other people have. Decisive Strike is one of the most well-known perks in Dead by Daylight. Even some people who have never played DBD will be familiar with it. For years, Decisive Strike was the single best perk for survivors by a landslide. But fast forward to present day, and it's not too uncommon to see matches where none of the 4 survivors have it. And even mentioning the perk's name ignites a full-fledged war in comment sections where people argue whether the perk is dead or not. This perk is so divisive that we might as well rename it to Divisive Strike. It's somewhat comparable to Ruin for killers, where it was once the most used perk by far, for years in fact, whereas the same can't be said about its use in present day. To discuss Decisive Strike's downfall, I must first explain what made it so powerful in the first place and what exactly pulled the perk down to where it is now. Original Decisive Strike. Decisive Strike was added all the way back in October of 2016 with the release of the Halloween chapter, containing both Michael Myers and Laurie Strode, undoubtedly the most important update ever for Dead by Daylight. If it weren't for this chapter, almost none of us would have ever heard of DBD, and it certainly wouldn't have grown to the incredible popularity it has today. Back then, things were much simpler. The entire player base was much newer, therefore much worse at the game, and balance wasn't taken anywhere near as seriously. The overall design of Myers and Laurie's perks seemed to be more reflective of their appearances, behaviors, and actions in the movies, with less of a focus on what this would mean for the balance of the game. A prime example would be Play With Your Food, a perk putting extreme emphasis on the stalking aspect of Myers, popping out at people for brief moments before retreating in order to build those stacks. Of course, hindsight tells us that intentionally losing chases really screws over your pressure as killer, even if that movement speed buff is really nice. But back then, the thought process was much more fun oriented. So while Myers got perks more geared towards obsessing over one target, Laurie got perks geared towards being a self-sufficient survivor too stubborn to accept death, with Sole Survivor, Objective Obsession, and Decisive Strike. Sole Survivor and Objective Obsession were originally designed to pair with each other, with Objective Obsession revealing the killer's aura to Laurie whenever she looks in their direction, with the downside of the killer also being able to see her aura at the same time. And Sole Survivor gradually blocked the killer's ability to see auras altogether depending on how many survivors were dead, to alleviate the downside of the killer seeing her as well. However, her last perk, Decisive Strike, was already a clear standout from the other two perks as it worked fine by itself. It didn't need any other perks to combine with it. Decisive Strike's function was simple. When the killer picks you up, hit a skill check to instantly wiggle free and leave the killer stunned for 5 entire seconds, thus giving birth to a genre of survivor perks now infamous for dominating metas for the last 5 years: second chance perks. Unlike the modern day version you're used to, the original version had no ifs and no buts. No timers, no obsession requirements, no need to be unhooked to activate it, doing gens or healing didn't disable it. It was genuinely as simple as killer picks you up, you hit a skill check, you instantly broke free. Needless to say, it was extremely strong. It was common to see matches where all 4 survivors had Decisive Strike equipped, and at least 2 decisives was practically guaranteed. The strength of Decisive Strike came from 2 core factors. The first, most obvious factor is simply getting a second chance at life before even being hooked the first time is very, very strong. The second factor is the ability to reset a chase. A hefty 5-second stun is no laughing matter, and the amount of distance you can gain from that is astounding, not to mention giving you plenty of time to reach your next safe loop. Decisive Strike's power was immediately visible, and after only 2 months it received its first nerf, having the stun reduced by 1 second. While a 20% stun reduction was certainly a step in the right direction, ultimately, Decisive Strike's popularity remained completely untouched. It was time to make a more substantial change. Only another 2 months after that, in February of 2017, Decisive Strike was changed to add an element of risk to the perk, tying the immediate stun effect to only the obsession. But the perk wasn't completely useless to non-obsessions. They could eventually stun the killer too just like normal, but only after filling the wiggle bar to 35%. Then they'd have the chance to hit their Decisive Strike skill check. While this change certainly added an element of risk, stopping it from being guaranteed value for all 4 survivors no matter what, it still had minimal effect on Decisive Strike's strength and popularity for 2 reasons. The first being that just having Decisive Strike equipped made you more likely to be the obsession, so it's not like somebody without the perk would end up stealing the spotlight. The other reason was that even if you weren't the obsession, achieving 35% wiggle progress really wasn't that hard nor uncommon, unless you went down straight in front of a hook. Also, hook spawns were really not the best for killers back then, with certain areas of certain maps rendering survivors completely unhookable. So, 4 months in and 2 nerfs after its release, Decisive Strike still held the crown for the best survivor perk by a total landslide, and its popularity was comparable to that of Ruin for killers. In other words, good luck finding a match where it isn't used. It would be an entire 2 years before Decisive Strike would receive any further changes. In the meantime, how were killers dealing with it? Well, due to the fact that Decisive Strike was practically guaranteed in every match, killers played with the assumption that every single survivor had it. This means that the obsession would frequently find themselves slugged to death, or at least slugged until the killer had built up substantial pressure and could afford to take the stun and pressure reset. In scenarios where the obsession was down vaguely close to a hook, the killers would perform what's called juggling, where they'd pick up the survivor, carry them for a moment, drop them, carry them again, drop them, and repeat until they reached a hook. This strategy completely bypassed Decisive Strike, as back then, the skill check would appear a second or so after the pickup animation finished, unlike nowadays where the skill check comes as you're being picked up. That being said, this strategy was quite time consuming, and unless the obsession was very close to the hook, it was honestly just as slow as taking the stun. There was also a glitch killers could utilize to straight up disable Decisive Strike by basic attacking at the exact same time as the survivor hit the skill check. Of course, killers couldn't see the skill check, so they didn't know exactly when to do it. While they did know when the skill check would pop up, they didn't know whereabouts on the circle the skill check would actually appear on, so it wasn't reliable. In a way, Decisive Strike was somewhat comparable to Ruin. They were both used almost every single match. They were both the most popular perks by a landslide, and they were both highly debated sources of frustration for the opposition. The difference between the two was that Decisive Strike was so much more controversial than Ruin, and Ruin was certainly controversial. The animal-like rage regarding DS from both sides can still clearly be seen today. Feel free to scroll down and see the comments for reference. But why exactly was that? Well, the first reason was just how huge of an impact Decisive Strike made to the killer's win condition. In a normal match, each survivor takes 3 hooks to kill, totaling to 12 hooks to kill all 4 survivors. With Decisive Strike effectively nullifying one instance of what would have been a hook, if all 4 survivors had it, the killer would pretty much have to work through 16 hooks to win. But I think the biggest factor was that it dealt a huge blow to the killer's pressure. Having to go through the song and dance of chasing a survivor, dealing with loops, getting a hit, catching up again, getting your second hit, just for you to lose that hard-earned hook and not only have to earn another hit on the survivor, but of them having a huge 4-second head start was not only demoralizing and frustrating, but it made the game so much more difficult for killers to actually win without tunneling. Keep in mind, back then, the game was plagued with infinite loops in a sizable chunk of the maps, there were more pallets, killers vaulted slower, broke pallets slower, syringes used to literally insta-heal you the same frame you used it, flashlights used to have insta-blind add-ons, brand new parts instantly repaired generators from 0 to 100% instead of the 15% they do nowadays, sprint burst regenerated at 50% speed while running, so every 1 minute the survivor would gain another sprint burst, maps were bigger, gens were faster, and survivors could literally teleport with something called pallet vacuum, as back then pallets could be interacted with from significantly further away, and they would instantly teleport to the opposite side of the pallet as they dropped it. As you can imagine, the game was absolutely horrendous for killers. Playing as killer was frustration after frustration, and the game was incredibly stacked in the survivor's favour. I think using Decisive Strike to just straight up get an extra life, as well as punish the killer for simply doing his job, was the straw that broke the camel's back. Needless to say, there was only so long behaviour could ignore it. Something had to be done. So 2 years later, on the 19th of March 2019, patch 2.6.0 released, and Decisive Strike was reworked. The perk's core functionality remained the same, but it had a new condition added to make the perk fix an issue that had steadily become a bigger problem over time: tunneling. It no longer mattered if you were the obsession or not, but Decisive Strike would only activate for 60 seconds after being unhooked. The stun duration was also reduced by a further second, bringing the total duration to 3 seconds. This change was absolutely huge. Killer players who didn't tunnel finally got to breathe a sigh of relief, as they would no longer be punished for simply playing well and downing a survivor. For the most part, there were some scenarios where the killer could hook survivor A, go and chase survivor B, hook them, stumble across survivor A again, and still end up taking a DS to the face despite not tunneling. But for the most part, this change was absolutely game-changing. Survivors, on the other hand, weren't taking things so well. A huge outcry immediately began, with people deeming the perk as useless, saying that they would never play this game ever again, or even coordinating review bombs on Steam, mass submitting negative reviews at the same time in an attempt to defund behaviour until they undo the nerf. While it could be easy to write off these people as bad players who couldn't play without their extra chance perk, and trying to defund the devs over a single perk change when things were already so heavily in the survivor's favour was certainly beyond childish, their claims of the perk being useless certainly weren't unfair. Because it absolutely was, for one reason: enduring. Enduring nowadays only reduces pallet stuns, but back then enduring reduced every stun, including Decisive Strike. Due to various factors, less perks in the game at that point, more pallets in the game, playstyle differences, etc., enduring was very much meta for killers and would be used in most matches. With DS only having a 3-second stun timer now, along with enduring speeding up stun recovery by 75%, DS really didn't help much at all. People who wanted to tunnel absolutely could with minimal repercussion. It was bad, really bad. While the devs certainly wanted to limit the effectiveness of DS so it wasn't a free get out of jail card, they didn't intend on making the perk borderline useless. More changes were needed. Only 2 weeks later, these changes came. The stun duration was buffed back to its original value of 5 seconds, so that it remained effective even against enduring, with the promise that if they ever made it so enduring doesn't affect DS, the stun will be brought back to 3 seconds. At this point, DS was in a pretty decent spot. It helped punish tunneling, but didn't punish other killers just for playing the game normally. It still wasn't perfect though. While DS was only active for 1 minute after being unhooked, that was pretty much 1 minute of straight god mode, as nothing other than time would disable decisive, meaning survivors could get unhooked, run to safety, heal to full, and then hop on a gen, or break the killer's ruin totem, and if the killer didn't realise that this survivor had recently been unhooked, they'd end up getting stunned anyway, even without the intention of tunneling. The other issue was that with the stun duration now being buffed to account for enduring, any killers without enduring would take an almighty hit to their pressure, far too big of a hit. So to get rid of this huge difference, 2 months later, the devs nerfed enduring so that it would only affect pallet stun durations. No longer would it affect DS. One slight issue though. Decisive Strike's stun duration still remained at its previous value of 5 seconds, which was specifically for enduring. So now every killer that got hit with it would have to take that almighty stun duration, enduring or not. This update started to make DS somewhat of a problem perk again, as increasingly, killers who weren't tunneling were getting hit by it more and more, whether it be getting lots of fast kills or survivors getting craftier to force value during that 60-second window. Nonetheless, it was still in a significantly better spot than before. It would be another 2 years before Decisive Strike would receive its next set of nerfs. On the 30th of March 2021, DS was nerfed with the addition of new restrictions that disable the perk if the user is doing things that indicate they are not being tunneled, such as repairing gens, healing, and breaking totems. Decisive Strike once again found itself in a good spot. With the stun duration still being high at 5 seconds, any tunneling killers would be punished severely, whereas the new restrictions helped ensure only tunnelers took this almighty stun. Survivors could enjoy a tunnel-free experience, and killer players could simply not tunnel if they didn't want to take the stun. Fast forward to the 19th of July 2022, 3 entire years after making the promise of bringing Decisive Strike's stun timer back to 3 seconds if enduring got nerfed, and over an entire year after that enduring nerf, they finally made good on that promise, for better or for worse, bringing the stun duration down from 5 seconds to 3 seconds, alongside disabling the perk once the last gen is finished, which is the current iteration of the perk at the time of this video. Which leaves us with one question. How do you feel about Decisive Strike nowadays? I personally think that the perk could do with a tiny buff, not to the stun duration, but to simply reduce the amount of stumble survivors get after using it and jumping off the killer's shoulder, so that just a bit more distance can be gained without keeping the killer stunned for longer. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.
ちんとしまっておこう。
星と深淵を目指せ。
モラックス、すべてのけりをつける時だ。
みんなは俺が守る。
砕けよ。大地の憤怒は
難攻不落。
静まらぬ。
落ちろ。
今こそすべての怨嗟を払う時なり。
剣女盤石。せえ。天道ここにある。はっせ。岩山八九。た隙あり。
花火にいやはっ
避けよ。
せっおっとタッチやっやってやっいやはっせっおっとえへいさあとりゃ
難攻不落。くらえ。落ちろ。言ってるぜおっと
千年もの雪辱を果たす。
岩山八九。塵となれ。
火の用心せっいや
様らの墓場となる。千年の怒りをしかとその身に受けるがよい。
全力攻撃だ。
言ってるぜ。おっとそりゃ
剣女盤石。冒険燃えろ。難攻不落天道万象。
地に帰れ。
させこっちが震えろ。剣女盤石。
避けよ。
はっ隙あり甘い。たふんはっはっせ隙あり岩山八九。はっふんふんや
正気の改作をし
やったはっ剣女盤石天理チョーク。ふん隙ありはっ
千年もの雪辱を
塵となれ。
果たす。
難攻不落。ふんはっ隙ありへっへっくらえふっいやみんながそばにいてこうせへっせはっはっ隙ありへっいや
避けよ。
はっはっ隙あり剣女盤石。ふんはっふんた隙ありふんへっふんはっはっ
粉に
隙あり
なるがよい。
いや岩山八九いざ天道万象。
ほらくせ。
次はどこに行くんだ？いいゆえの名所を巡りたいならいい案がいくつかあるぞ。甘い。難攻不落。たっはっはっはっやっせっはっはっ隙あり。岩山八九せっ
昴生はってや落ちろほっ震えろ
剣女盤石。やっはっせっはっふんやっはっふんはっはっ隙ありはっふっふっ隙あり。天理チョーク。
昴生
難攻不落。
塵となれ
やっふん隙あり。剣女盤石。はっはっ
落ちろ
せっはっ
行くで。
難攻不落。甘い。
震えろ
剣女盤石。隙あり。ふんやいざ。はっ難攻不落。はっ岩山八九。
昴生やはっだあ
隙あり。ふんたっはっ剣女盤石。いざ。偶然の出会いには趣がある。ふっいざ。 岩山八九
塵となれ。
難攻不落。
落ちろ。
好き。岩山八九
火の用心。いやそりゃ。
難攻不落。やふん隙あり。甘い。はっはっは。
やっやっへい。はあ。せっふっ。ほな。
剣女盤石。
震えろ。
天道万象。はっふん
いやそりゃ。せっはっやっ。いくで。
こうせ。よっ。で、や。
いざ。
せっへい。おっと先。
岩山八九
こうせ。へっはっはあ。
そりゃ。
女盤石。
震えろ。
天道ここにあり。ふん隙あり。
後世。
暗山八九。
行くで。ほな。行くで。なんでなんになんにな。
God of War Ragnarok is gonna drop the F-bomb. With the new ESRB rating for the upcoming God of War game, we were expecting a mature rating. It's not really a surprise, considering how all the God of War games have been geared towards adults. Even if you haven't played one, if you know the series, you'll understand that. However, it's good to have the reasons why, in case you personally are sensitive to things, or if your kid isn't 17 and wants you to get it for them and there's certain things you'd like them to avoid seeing. The rating summary says you'll use multiple axes, chained blades, and a whole suite of new elemental powers to fight foes, which results in large blood splatters and dismemberment. Finishing attacks will also show close-up impalement with bladed weapons, decapitation, oh, and they'll end up saying fucking shit, because God of War Ragnarok is gonna drop.
Focus on my breathing. But you don't breathe. Indeed.
Been a while.
Hello, world.
Keep in sight. I'll have us in and out in no time. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Defeat cannot break one who perseveres.
Actuating the barrier.
True strength does not always lie in victory. Join me.
Dual visor activated.
A reminder that life is Failure is acceptable. Giving up is not. 1,000 times darker stand.
The best laid plans have backup plans.
Send my greetings to Asa-sensei.
You can say hi yourself.
Ik sta te popelen.
Stay in sight, and I'll keep you safe.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Attack commence. Action objective.
Interesting. Thanks. The kitsune is ready to be unleashed. Let the kitsune guide you. This might hurt more than usual. Got one here. Enemy here. Powered up. Nice. Right over. Let's keep it moving. Be careful, Shimada. Carried on the wind. Over here. I'm here. Thanks for the blood. We need to move payload. My sensitive target. Feels like sunlight, huh? Thanks for the touch-up. I've got you. Oh, that's
It's go time.
time to get clever. Checking in. Ash here. I take care of my friends. I've got a few tricks. I take care of my friends. Like a gentle rain. Got one here.
battlefield.
I still have much to learn.
Locked and loaded. Who's ready to get this done? Do you want a bandage for that?
Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
I prepped all night for this mission. Well, maybe I gained a little too.
This mission is going smooth as butter. Not every day gives you a second chance.
Over here!
Approaching escape velocity.
魔法発動。ブルーアイズアルティメットドラゴンカオストルジャー究極融合召喚イデオマスターオブドラゴンナイトいけマスターオブドラゴンナイトクライダーツギャラクシークラッシャー
Nerf Pig. No doubt every single one of you watching this video has heard of this meme before. Whether it be commented under every single Dead by Daylight patch note tweet, in most forum posts regarding killer balance, or even your favourite YouTubers and streamers referencing it.
Here we go. They need to nerf the pig even more. I almost hit her with that.
So let me explain to you exactly how the pig became the laughingstock of the DBD community. All the way back on January the 23rd, 2018, the pig released alongside Detective Tapp in the Saw chapter, filling the role of being a stealth killer with a new and unique gameplay loop for both her and the survivors, the reverse bear traps. Inspired by the movies, the pig could place these traps on downed survivors' heads. After a generator was completed, the traps would activate, starting a countdown. When time's up, the trap detonates, annihilating the survivor's bottom jaw and instantly killing them.
That was a very good lesson. We're outnumbered. Mind yourself. Advancing upward.
Block their path.
Advancing upward.
It's at your service.
This time I have it. My skills are improving. Adaptive circuits engaged. Reinhardt.
Now entering King's Row.
Got a good cigar? Big iron in my head. What more does a man need? Give me something to drink.
Find your strength. We are soon to need it.
Thank you.
Just one more mission.
Scaling up.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Attackers incoming.
Creating new neural pathways. On the move.
Healing fortified.
I've got your back.
Engage.
Careful.
Taking flight.
No.
I'll keep you up. That feels better. My ultimate is fully charged. Get ready. How can I adjust? On the move. Group up with me.
Release your suffering.
Fall back.
My ultimate is charging.
Taking flight.
30 seconds remaining.
My ultimate is ground. No.
these upgrades, they don't stand a chance.
Survivors would have to search through jigsaw boxes to find their assigned key and remove their box. Survivors also couldn't escape the match while trapped. If they attempted to, their traps would detonate, turning what would have been an escape into an instant death. These bear traps made matches against the pig far different to every other killer, mainly due to the secondary objectives survivors would have to tend to other than generators, thus granting the pig the secondary role of being the first killer with gen slowdown as part of their kit, since every second spent removing the reverse bear trap is a second spent not repairing gens. Since survivors couldn't escape while trapped, the pig earned a reputation as being the late game killer, since she could save her traps for late game and have all survivors stuck in the match even when the gens were done. Aside from an initial splash where survivors first had to adjust to her new mechanics, the pig released to astounding mediocrity. While better than the low tier killers at the time like Wraith and Trapper, she certainly couldn't keep up with the big boys like Nurse and Hillbilly. To put it as simply as possible, she wasn't a problem, and the majority of the community agreed with that. With the Nurse still reigning supreme with her old blink timers, old add-ons, and seemingly next to no nerfs coming in, when you think of which killers needed to be nerfed, the pig definitely wasn't on that list. As she was still fresh out of launch, she had a few bugs that first needed to be addressed, both in her favour and against her. So over the course of 2018, the pig's changes only consisted of bug fixes. The first bug fix was fixing an issue that allowed the pig to get an automatic kill when dropping a survivor that's trapped at the exit gate. This was a pretty hefty oversight, and cheeky pig players absolutely used this to get some cheeky insta-kills late game. The next two bug fixes were in her favour, where they fixed a bug that made it so the pig couldn't hit survivors on stairs with her dash attack, and another bug that made it so her red stain didn't disappear when crouched. So far, so good. These are fairly typical bug fixes that we'd expect, and nothing was out of the ordinary. Pig was a cool late game stealth killer who wasn't too strong, but wasn't terrible either. Then 2019 happened. I don't know if behaviour had a falling out with the Saw license holders, but it seems this was the year that the devs suddenly decided that they hated the pig. Wasting no time whatsoever, straight off the bat in January of 2019, patch 2.5.0 released, hitting the pig with one of the biggest nerfs you would ever see even to this day. Her terror radius was nerfed, being increased from 24 meters to 32 meters. What was the reason for this, you may ask? Was her stealth aspect deemed too frustrating or too strong? No, the devs stated that they had a change in game design philosophy and wanted to standardize killer terror radiuses based on movement speed, meaning that normal speed killers like Wraith, Trapper, Pig, etc. would have a 32 meter terror radius, whereas slow killers like Hag would receive a 24 meter radius. Make sure to remember this statement for later. They wanted to standardize terror radiuses based on movement speed. Now, there were some buffs they gave her to even out this nerf, and those were that she could now crouch 0.7 seconds faster, and her terror radius would fade away faster when crouched. Since they buffed her base crouching speed, they also nerfed her most popular add-on, Combat Straps, since it also sped up her crouch speed. They reduced its value by 70%. While the faster base crouching speed was definitely a welcome addition, the terror radius nerf heavily outweighed these buffs. The reason this was such a big nerf for her was because it effectively gutted her stealth aspect. Having a smaller terror radius of 24 meters allowed her to get much closer to a survivor before having to crouch if she wanted to remain stealthy. When crouched, the pig's movement speed is reduced significantly, so pig players ideally don't want to be crouched for too long or else it would waste too much time. By increasing her terror radius to 32 meters, survivors would be
Arriving at launch point to prepare to attack. Select your hero.
Strike from above.
No wonder, Marshall. We all have to put in the work. Play nice, play far off.
We should begin.
I'm not
Ready
here
for
to
some
work.
fireworks?
But stay close. I can't hear you if you stray. Hello.
Watch your flanks. They might try something.
Enhancing your strength.
I will not waste this opportunity.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
See an enemy.
Thanks for the assist. Now go get him. Time to kick some tail.
be able to hear the pig from much further away, meaning she would have to start crouching much earlier on if she wanted to sneak up on them, therefore spending even more time with reduced movement speed and ending up losing much more pressure. However, even on day one of the previously mentioned standardization, their plan was already thrown out the window, as Michael Myers still got to keep his 16-meter terror radius despite having the same movement speed as the pig. Of course, I'm not saying that they should have nerfed Myers, but all this already proved that the standardization was much more of a direct nerf to the pig than a real shift in design philosophy. Regardless of how big of a nerf this was, it had the community puzzled, because why nerf a killer that wasn't even that good anyway? It seemed so out of the blue. These changes seriously hurt the pig's stealth aspect and even caused some dedicated pig players to give up on her. While she still wasn't terrible, as her reverse bear trap still helped her with gen slowdown, she was now in a worse situation than she needed to be. Things needed to change. So a few months later, the PTB for patch 2.7.0 hits, bringing a new series of changes to the pig. Nerf: reverse bear traps no longer activate during endgame collapse. Nerf: reverse bear traps will no longer kill escaping survivors unless they were activated by a gen. Nerf: reverse bear trap timers will pause when in the pig's terror radius. The community was absolutely gobsmacked. After this patch, the pig was no longer a late game killer. Thankfully, the nerf that paused trap timers while in her terror radius never made it into the live game. They didn't want to nerf her too much after all. In the first half of 2019, behavior had hit a mid-tier killer with 3 absolutely huge nerfs, and things were starting to add up now. Killers were playing pig less and less, and it goes without
In my world, there are no secrets. Always got an exit. Just in case system compromised.
Hey there. Bunch together.
You're in the doghouse. You're mine now.